Well, thank you very much, and I want to welcome everyone out there. Thanks for joining us. By the way, here is a list of authors. Helen right now is on an airplane, so as much as she would like to be joining in, she won't be able to. Here's kind of the way I'd like to run things today. I'm going to talk for about 30 minutes about the results of our research over the past about 7 years or so. And then I'm going to bring Javier and Aida in, and the three of us will talk a little bit about the nature of binational research and kind of what we've learned from it, what we've gained from it, et cetera. And then we'll leave time at the end for you all to ask questions about anything. So again, here is the title of the talk. It is Fescue Rescue. We kind of like to have puns built into our titles where possible. A binational project to recover Guadalupe Fescue in the northern Sierra Madre Oriental. This list of authors here really is only part of a larger group that's working to save Guadalupe Fescue. And we greatly appreciate their collaboration and the generous support received from agencies and institutions listed here. In particular, we want to extend our great gratitude to Anna Strong and the team at Texas Parks and Wildlife, who have been there with us for many years and provided financial support and logistical help and encouragement as well. They're part of the team as well. We want to dedicate this talk to Joe Sirotnik on the right, past botanist at Big Bend National Park and early protector of Guadalupe Fescue, who passed away in 2019, and to our wonderful friend and collaborator on this project, Jesus Valdez Reyes, who passed away in 2024. Guadalupe Fescue is a small, perennial, very cute, rhizomatous, montane bunchgrass distinguished by a lack of awns on the florets and very conspicuous ligules at the juncture of the leaf blade and stem, which is essential for its identification. Despite its rarity, where it occurs, it's often in dense patches, such as this patch here in Boot Canyon and the Chisos Mountains in Big Bend National Park. The rarity of Guadalupe Fescue, as well as possible population decline, led to its listing as an endangered species in 2017, spearheaded by Dr. Chris Best at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. In Mexico, it's a species of concern. Now, at the beginning of our study in 2019, the plant was confirmed from only two sites, Boot Canyon in the Chisos Mountains and Big Bend National Park, and near Campo Dos in the Sierra del Carmen and the Maderas del Carmen protected area, just across the border in Coahuila. There were large gaps in our knowledge of Guadalupe Fescue at the beginning of our study. Our goal was to address some of these. So we addressed four sort of fundamental questions or lines of investigation in this study. First of all, we wanted to know, is this species actually reproductively viable still in the field? And then second, we wanted to know, what does it need? What are its habitat requirements? In other words, what are its microenvironmental microsite preferences? A second part of the study was to follow aspects of the demography of this species, in particular survival and reproduction. So to follow that over time, but early on, fate intervened and there was a wildfire in 2021, and we began to focus those demographic studies on what was the impact of the wildfire and the response of this population in Big Bend National Park and Boot Canyon to this wildfire. But as you'll see, we continued after that to monitor demography as well. Third, an important part of the project was to try to find new populations, new with quotes around it. A lot of what we did is to find botanical records and other records of sites where this species had been seen in the distant past, and to go back and see if those populations still existed. Of course, we also were very excited about the possibility of finding completely new populations as well. And then finally, really a very exciting part of the study was to try to develop tools and actually employ some of those tools to augment the wild populations. In other words, the in situ populations. So let's start with the first set of questions, which deals with habitat preferences, microsite preferences of Guadalupe fescue, and then also seed production and viability. So we worked in both of the confirmed sites. Again, that's Boot Canyon and Big Bend National Park in the Chisos, and also in near Campo Dos in the Sierra del Carmen and the Maderas del Carmen protected area. And what we did is we permanently tagged a large number of plants in both of these populations, and then documented the surrounding microsite in terms of environmental variables that we felt were likely to be important for this species. And then the idea was to compare those plant microsites and microenvironments with randomly selected ones in the same sort of area where the population occurred. So we wanted to know, are they preferentially growing in places that are a little different than what is randomly available there? In terms of reproduction, we collected spikelets, florets, and we analyzed them later in the lab for seed fill, and then we tested those for seed germination. It was really difficult work in very remote places, but we persisted, as you can see here. Really is spectacular places to work, so I felt privileged the whole time to be working in those places. So this shows the result of the microsite work. Here are 9 environmental variables that we thought are likely to be important to the success of Guadalupe fescue. And I'm not going to go through all of these. Each one of these graphs shows the results for the fescue microsites in comparison to the random microsites. Over on the right-hand side, let me just sort of summarize what these results show you. By the way, at the bottom here are our sample sizes. So it turns out that Guadalupe fescue likes a little bit of shade, but not too much shade. So it likes less woody plant shade than is generally available in the habitat. It likes places where there's lower density of forbs. It likes places where there's less litter. And it likes places that are rocky. Go figure. I'm going to show you a couple of slides just to give you sort of images of the typical habitat. This is from Boot Canyon, the Chisos Mountains. If you look in the middle photograph, here again, Guadalupe fescue likes rocky, partly shaded, low litter sites. I mean, look at that. It looks like a big pile of rocks, and that's kind of what it's like there. What is really striking is that very close by, adjacent to this particular site, for example, are sites that seem from human eyes to be much more favorable, much less rocky, deeper soil, etc. And in those places, you find tons of pinyon rice grass and some other grasses, but not Guadalupe fescue. This suggests that Guadalupe fescue is a stress tolerator, and it's confined perhaps because of, maybe I'm speculating, a lack of competitive ability, confined to these sites that are a little more rigorous, a little more difficult for many plants to grow in. By the way, at the bottom, you can see the population elevation slice that occurs across very, very narrow elevational distribution. You can see 2066 to 2152 meters. Dr. Norma Fowler at University of Texas did an estimation of population size using some modeling approaches. She estimated 1,800 plants approximately in the Boot Canyon population. Similar sort of photographs and information for Sierra del Carmen near Campo Dos. Again, very rocky, typical habitat. You can see here, elevation a little bit higher, but again, very narrow elevational range for this species. We haven't done formal modeling of population size, but just counts suggest at least 300, maybe more than 300. One of the interesting things about this population near Campo Dos is that it occurs in the footprint of a 2003 fire. Now, we were already thinking, maybe this species needs fire. And of course, this result made us think that it was really worthwhile if we had a chance to investigate that. And we did have a chance to investigate that. So again, remember, we are carrying out this long-term demographic study looking at survival and reproduction annually, so looking at it every year. Early in the study, in April of 2021, a large fire broke out on the south, called the South Rim 4 fire in Big Bend National Park. The pink shows the footprint of this fire, 543 hectares, and the blue oval is the footprint for the Guadalupe fescue population. So this fire burned through the entire Guadalupe fescue population, generally at low and sort of moderate severity fire. Now, there are other parts of this fire that burned at very, very high severity, really scorched everything, but not so much for the Guadalupe Fescue population. So what a great opportunity, because we already have these tagged plants. So we're like tagging a cohort of plants and then following their fate through time. And then the fire intervenes. Okay, a lot of data here. Let's focus on the left-hand side first. There are the 327 plants that we tagged in 2019. And then this follows on the left-hand side. The blue are for plants that were still alive, the orange is for dead plants, and the gray is for not found plants. Now, many of those were the result of a torrential downpour, an erosion event that kind of wiped out a whole bunch of plants. It at least tags right after the fire. Now, on the right-hand side, what we've done is combined the dead and the not found, and just made the assumption that we can't find them, they're probably dead. This is probably a more conservative estimate of survival. So let's pay attention to the right-hand side. So you can see going from 2020, 327 plants, then the fire occurs in early 2021, then we sample in the fall of 2021. You can see about half the plants died, as at least correlated with this fire. Clearly, most of these plants died because of the fire, because you could see burnt kind of stems, you could see that they hadn't resprouted, etc. So in the short run, clearly Guadalupe Fescue did not like this fire one bit. Now, in the long run, what's really interesting, a very interesting pattern, is that survival is really quite high. A few plants die every year, but survival is really, really quite high, despite the fact that a couple of these years were some of the hottest, driest years in the historic record. Really quite remarkable. So clearly, this species has high survival rates and is very drought resistant. The other thing is that this suggests, because remember, we're not adding plants to this as we go along. So all these plants started in 2019. So clearly, these plants can live for quite a while. And many of the plants that we tagged in 2019 were already reproducing, they were already mature. Who knows how old they were? So we suspect that these plants can live for a decade, maybe much more than a decade. So this starts to shape our view of kind of like, what is the life history strategy of this species? Clearly, it lives for a long time, and also it seems to be drought resistant. It's a stress tolerator, and half of the plants survived the fire. Now, here are the impacts on reproduction of the fire and longer-term demography for reproduction. So on the left-hand side, far left-hand side, you see the year, and there is the fire in early 2021. There, the number of reproductive plants, total plants, percent of the plants that reproduced, and very importantly, percent seed fill. Now, in grasses, often they will make flowers and often not fill them with seeds. And so that's why we went afterwards and did the laborious work of documenting what percentage of the florets actually have seeds in them. 2020 was a banner year. As you can see, half the plants reproduced, and more than half of the florets were filled with seeds. Really, really great. After the fire, only 6% of the plants reproduced. We did not document seed fill, and the same for 2022. Now, so you would surmise from this that the fire had a really kind of negative impact on reproduction. What's interesting, though, and important, is that those 2 years, 2021 and 2022, were extremely hot and dry. I mean, hotter, it's always hot and dry there, but hotter and drier than almost any 2 years in a row in the historic record. So we can't really tease apart the impact then of the fire versus moisture stress on this lack of reproduction. We just don't know. And it could have been a combination as well. Now, 2023 was a really interesting year. So notice that 67% of the plants flowered that year. But notice the seed fill rate. Only about 3% of the florets actually had seeds in them. And here's what we think happened. So May of that year was an unusually moist month. And these plants flowered about 2 months before they typically flower. Typically they flower September, October, sometime around then. They flowered in June. And you can see most of the plants flowered then. What happened though then is perhaps this was bad timing because the rest of the summer was very, very hot and very, very dry. So we surmise from this that these plants are very flexible about their reproductive timing, as many grasses are, and they thought, with quotes around it, there's a lot of moisture, let's go ahead and flower. They did, and then there was not sufficient moisture to actually fill those florets with seeds the rest of the summer. Now, 2025, just a few months ago, 6.9% of the plants were flowering and had very high seed fill rates. So that's promising and encouraging. Okay, on to the third part of the study, and that is the search for new populations or to confirm populations that had been kind of documented half a century ago or more. So recall that early in the study, that at the beginning of the study, that there were only two sites that were confirmed: the Chisos Mountains and the Sierra del Carmen. Those are shown in blue here. All the red sites are places where we had herbarium records and or other records as well of past documentation of Guadalupe Fescue. And you can see them here. I'm going to show you an updated version of this map in a moment, but I do want to show you a few of these sites. So let's start with the Guadalupe Mountains. So Guadalupe Fescue was first described, documented, herbarium specimen, et cetera, in the 1930s in McKittrick Canyon in Guadalupe Mountains, named after Guadalupe Mountains, Guadalupe Fescue. And it was seen again through the 1950s and then not seen after that. There have been lots of expeditions to try to find it, and we thought that sounds worth doing. So we went back to McKittrick Canyon. We searched in the places where it was found previously, and unfortunately, we were not able to locate it there. The same with a site called El Jardín in far northern Coahuila. This is a limestone mountain that you can see really well from Emery Peak in the Chisos. And it's right next to Sierra del Carmen, sometimes sort of grouped together with it. But Sierra del Carmen is volcanic and that is limestone, but they're kind of connected to each other in a way. So population had been seen previously there. Javier went to search for the population, was not able to find it. But Javier made up for that with a remarkable discovery. So in a canyon called Cañón de la Cueva de la Sal, Javier found a never seen before population of Guadalupe Fescue, just on sort of routine work. And there they were, at least 3 subpopulations at the end. Javier can update us on that. Lots of plants, et cetera. Typical habitat, very similar to the habitats we've seen, very narrow elevational range, et cetera. So we have continued to work, especially Javier has continued to work in Cañón de la Cueva de la Sal, which I'll call in some places Cañón del Caballo for short. Another place where there was a documentation in the 1970s during a botanical expedition that Jesus Valdez-Reyes was part of, so this is half a century ago, was at the top, way up at the very top of the pretty high Sierra La Madera. And so we made a hike that was grueling for me. I think not that grueling for Javier, but we made it, at least Javier and someone from the community made it to the top, to the population. We confirmed that there is a population still up there. Now, it took so long to get up there that we really didn't have time to get an estimate of population size, et cetera, but it's great to find this population up there. Okay, so here is an update from 2026. There, the Chisos Mountains. So the Chisos Mountains there and the Sierra del Carmen. I'll come back to Sierra del Carmen in just a moment. The red are places where there were past records that we revisited. We did not find Guadalupe Fescue there. And then Sierra La Madera, past records. We confirmed a population there, Cañón del Caballo. Javier found a new population there. Now, the exciting thing is that some folks, I think including Javier, found an additional population in the Sierra del Carmen. So whereas in 2019, we started with 2 confirmed populations, by the end of the study, so this year we have 5 confirmed population, which is great. Now, one question that probably is in your mind, and that is, are there more populations out there? And probably the answer is, sort of makes sense that there would be. And let me show you some evidence for this. So this is a table from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Species Status Assessment of Guadalupe Fescue from 2016. We don't have to look at all the numbers here. Just look at the number that is in the oval. So that is the number of hectares of suitable habitat for Guadalupe Fescue in Texas and Coahuila. So 500,000 hectares. So this suggests that it's very possible that there are more populations out there just waiting to be discovered. On to the last part of the study, and this is population augmentation. So the goal here was to develop tools again and protocols for collecting seed, germinating them, growing them, etc., and then transplanting them back into their natal populations. There was an additional kind of ambitious goal, and that was, could we actually get them to reproduce ex situ and actually begin to accumulate a seed bank that we could use for future purposes or purposes during the study as well. So let me talk a little bit about this. So this is a part of the study led by Aida Robles and also by Karen Little and Kelsey Wogon. So Aida is at Lanaro and Saltillo, and Karen and Kelsey are at Sol Ross and Alpine. And so they're carrying on sort of parallel, kind of development of tools and protocols for doing this transplant, genetically keeping the populations completely separate, so they never cross over. Up in the left-hand side, you can see the seeds, or see the florets with some seeds inside of them. Population seed fill rate, as I mentioned previously, is incredibly variable. It varies from about 3 to 61%. It varies within a plant, it varies within populations, but especially it varies year to year. Germination, they germinate just fine. But it varies a lot, 8 to 90%. This is a good spot for me to mention something. So during the study, we got an email from Steve Blackwell at the Desert Botanic Garden in Phoenix, Arizona. And he said that he was growing Guadalupe Fescue, germinated from seeds that they had frozen at the Desert Botanic Garden that were collected almost 30 years ago in Boot Canyon. And this is remarkable. He was getting 90% germination rates. So this suggests that there's some degree of seed dormancy and that they are still viable after a very long time. So this was remarkable news to get. And this comes into play in the transplants, as you will see in just a moment. Now, in terms of growth, they grew readily, but we did have some problems after a few months of the plants thriving. In some cases, they began to decline some. We've kind of figured some of that out, but as you can see, there's still a lot of steps to kind of figure out, and little issues keep coming up, but very, very successful. And we can attribute that to the skills of Aida and Karen and Kelsey. Okay, in terms of reproduction, this turned out to be really interesting. So we were hoping to be proud parents. And so we grew them in Alpine and in Saltillo, and we grew them for a year, and they didn't reproduce. 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and it didn't reproduce. You know, it's like having kids in their 20s and 30s, and you're like, when are you going to have children? And so we're waiting, and then finally at 5 years, both in Saltillo, especially in Saltillo, but also a couple of the plants in Alpine began to flower and produce seed, which is very exciting. Another interesting piece of evidence here that this is a long-lived plant, and it's not a plant that germinates and within a year or two flowers and reproduces and then dies. They live for a long time, and perhaps they put off reproduction until they're large enough. We'll return to that in a few minutes. Okay, so here is what we did in the field. So we took seeds collected in Boot Canyon, we germinated and grew them at Sol Ross, and then we took them back and transplanted them into Boot Canyon. We took seedlings that were germinated and grown from Boot Canyon, from the Desert Botanic Garden, and we transplanted them back into Boot Canyon. And then in Coahuila, Aida and Javier collected seeds and germinated and grew them at Lanaro, and then transplanted them back into sites that we had collected the seeds from, just across the border from the Chisos. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the results. So here is a transplant trial from Cañon de Caballo. So here is Javier, a couple of things to notice about this. Very tiny little seedlings. The other thing is that it was really challenging to bring water to this site. It's a very long drive, but not just that, it is a very long hike to get up there as well. It's very challenging to actually water the seedlings or to bring very large seedlings as well. So many more constraints in at this site than, for example, in Boot Canyon, where there is water available right there. It's a hike to get up there, but there's water available there. So Javier transplanted 14 seedlings in July of 2021. 5 survived as of the fall. 2 survived as of 2024. Again, remember, tiny seedlings and little watering. Here's the transplant trial from the Chisos Mountains. Large seedlings, we had the capacity to water them multiple times as well. Let me show you the results of that. There's a lot of information here, so hang on. Let me try to describe this. 2 different cohorts we planted. One was in October, cool, moist October 2022. We planted 21 plants. And then a second cohort we planted in June 2023, planted 57 plants. Let's focus on the left-hand side for the October 2022 cohort. This shows survival and reproduction. If you look at survival, that left-hand column there, very high survival. Comparable to what we found in the wild population. So not many plants are dying each year. In terms of reproduction, very similar to what we found in the wild population. We were surprised that these were not very old. These were maybe 3 years old, and they did begin to reproduce. By the way, 2 asterisks means that there was high seed fill. 1 means it was very low seed fill, just like in the wild population. So we're getting some reproduction, a little bit of reproduction in the transplants, which is awesome. Over on the right-hand side, the June 2023. Now you may ask, why are you doing a transplant in June in the Chisos Mountains? Well, we did that because, remember, as I said earlier, that May was so moist, and Guadalupe Fescue was flowering 2 months early, and we thought they're giving us a cue. This is a good time. Let's go ahead and do the transplant then. Then, of course, as I also mentioned, the rest of the summer was very hot and dry. Bad timing for sure. So here's survival. You can see survival is much, much lower in the population that we planted in the fall. Both of these were watered. So it has something to do with, their kind of how well they did initially. And I think these plants really suffered a lot during the rest of the summer. No reproduction at all. So in terms of the outcomes, though, the most important thing is that here is proof of concept. We can augment these populations. We can collect seeds, we can germinate them, we can grow them, we can transplant them back. It's labor intensive, but we can augment these wild populations. There are clearly some lessons here. Plant in the autumn. I'm sure Chris Best, if he's here, is saying, yeah, I told you so. Water the seedlings and use large seedlings where possible. So some conclusions. I know this is a long list, but we've been doing this for a while. We don't want to leave anything out. So number 1 is that Guadalupe Fescue has a very narrow environmental range. And this may be part of why it's a very rare species. So very rare elevational range, very kind of, it has very specific kind of microsite preferences. It likes these rocky places. It seems to be a stress tolerator, confined to places that, at least from a human perspective, don't seem that favorable. The wild plants produce viable seeds just fine. These plants seem to live a long time, and they seem to be pretty drought resistant, at least in terms of survival. Reproduction seems variable. They seem to be able to time things, and they seem to be able to reproduce depending on moisture availability from the little bit of data that we have. So this gives a new perspective on this life history strategy of this species, and that is be there in the long game, survive, and wait till conditions are good, and then reproduce. Wildfire, at least this wildfire, seemed to have negative short-term effects. Long-term, we're not really sure. One of the things we've just recently added to this study is to set out some recruitment plots. Are we getting seedlings in these? We haven't had time to process the data, but I can tell you from our observations that there are hardly any new seedlings out there of Guadalupe Fescue. So there was not a post-fire recruitment pulse. So that is clear. Population augmentation is clearly feasible and possible to continue into the future. And there are at least 5 extant populations now, potentially more. Future prospects. Clearly, this species is very low in terms of its resilience, its redundancy, multiple populations, and representation, probably. That's genetic variation. We don't really know much about that, as I'll mention at the bottom here. Continued population augmentation is really critical for this population, given the variability we've seen, the impacts of drought on reproduction, the negative impact of the wildfire, et cetera. They're very concentrated. They're over, they don't cover a lot of area, so they are for sure vulnerable. Establishment of new populations, I say, is critical here. So Ida and Javier kind of cautioned me a little bit about that, and I think rightly so. And that would be a wonderful ambition to accomplish, but very challenging for many reasons that I won't go into right here. Finally, it would really be important to know more about within and among population genetic diversity. When did these populations diverge? How much variation is there within these populations? How differentiated are the populations as well? So with that, I will stop and we'll take questions at the end. What I want to do now is to open this up and let Javier and Aida first talk a little bit about our binational kind of collaboration, and then I'll mention a few things as well, but I want to focus mainly on what they have to say. Thank you all for making it through this part of the presentation.
Thank you, Drew. I think Ida and Javier just need to unmute themselves because I have made them panelists.
Wonderful.
And maybe turn on their video as well.
Okay.
Estamos. Hello, how are you?
Hola, Javier. Aida.
Okay, here we
Gracias.
are. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Javier Ochoa. I am a professor and researcher right here in Antonio Narro University at the Department of Natural and Renewable Resources right here in Antonio Narro, and my colleague and friend.
Hola, hi, my name is Aida. I am a professor and research in Antonio Narro University.
She's based in the agrobiological department. So for us, I mean, I don't know if we want to follow some kind of questions or something like this. First, we need to apologize for our English, and this is not the perfect, but we will always try to do our best. And Drew asked for us just to talk a little bit about what about the experience of this binational collaboration.
Javier, can I interrupt you for just a second? And please don't apologize. We have worse Spanish than you have English, so we very much appreciate you adapting to us. Drew, do you think you could turn off your presentation so we don't look at the presentation screen or your screen right now?
Oh yeah, Mrs. Andrew.
Is that better?
Well, for just a second we went to the PowerPoint and then we came back.
Take
All right. I'm gonna quit.
Okay,
PowerPoint.
that's fine. That's fine too.
Good. Okay.
Well, so we can still see. You have to say stop sharing.
Oh, sorry.
Sí.
Is that better?
That's wonderful.
Okay. And I also want to apologize for any translation issues in the Spanish that I had in there. I felt it was important this is a binational project. So at the very least, it needed to have Spanish translations for most of the words in there. So I know that there still probably were a few little issues there, but I apologize for that.
Actually, was perfect for us. I mean, we were checking out, and it's actually perfect. Thank you for that, Drew.
Well, you all already corrected some things for me, so thank you for doing that yesterday. It was great. So yeah, so we want to talk about like what this was like, and take it away.
I don't know. I mean, for us, I mean, I am I am pretty sure that I am talking for Aida and for me, and this always has been a very, very a great experience talking about the things that we can do together as nations, as United States and Mexico, because not all the projects that face that kind of challenge. The same for communication language, the same for technical or even scientific skills sometimes. Because we are actually a group of a different kind specialists, different expertises. So that was one of the things that we thought, we think that the project is promoting a lot. In the very beginning, when Dr. Valdez met me when I was a field technician right there in Maderas del Carmen, I understand from him that the need for an agrostologist, an expert like him, was very, very important. And then he looking for the advice or the guidance of the some other actors like Natural Protectors Areas Commission, the place where I was formerly a former technician, and then he moved and looking for Aida's expertise right here in Anarro. So that was a sort of combination of skills, abilities, and that is a very good point, because maybe any other project just can try to cover that gaps from the one side. And one very good thing about this project was that was covering for both sides, actually. You can go in Spanish and I can translate.
No, pues la colaboración ha sido muy importante, sobre todo por el tratar de comparar, como ya mencionó Drew, las condiciones de Festuca en los hábitats de Estados Unidos y las que están en México. Nos ha permitido explorar nuevos sitios para reconocer las áreas donde están establecidas, las comunidades donde están establecidas la Festuca, y en particular la reproducción, que ha sido muy importante.
Furthermore, the administration or the personal skills that I mentioned, Aida is highlighting what was really important to compare ecological situations in both, or similarities in both parts of the border. I mean, nature don't have border, but for this kind of project, it's a very good opportunity to try to check it out. Even how can we make or understand that kind of difference, talking about reproduction and talking about ecological similarities and so on. And what else?
One thing just to bring in here, it's kind of funny. I didn't really think about this that much till now, but I think one of the things that was really important for Helen and me early on was that we really needed help from someone who knew grasses and someone who knew seed ecology and germination ecology, because we're plant ecologists and forest ecologists. We didn't know that much about that. Helen and I joked, this is a slight exaggeration, but not a large one. Helen and I joked at the beginning of the study that we could identify 2 grass species. We could identify Guadalupe Fescue and not Guadalupe Fescue. We do a few more, but you may not know, but Javier is actually an international grass identification champion. Sorry to embarrass you, but he really is, actually. And Aida knows so much about how seeds work and germination and the techniques for doing that. These are things that we really did not have the capacity to do. So there was the binational part, but there also was the interdisciplinary part. So I just want to continue though, please.
Thank you, Drew. And also, it's very important to mention here to the audience, to you all, is about the support of our institutions. It's very important. In the case of Antonio Narro, that project allows us to build, actually, make a very strong structure about a specific line of investigation. In that particular case, Dr. Valdez already worked with rare species, which it was grass species actually, and his research was always covering a wide range of different kind of grasses, because he always was his expertise always was grasses, and even he has located some other species of fescue in North Coahuila and in other spaces, always helping with determination, taxonomic determination, etc., etc. So for us, was very important Dr. Valdez support for the project, because it's like a base ton of this project right here in Lanaro. So it allows us to try to keep going and try to explore some different opportunities to research. Actually, the work that Aida is doing is a very, very good job right here, trying to expand that kind of protocols for germination, different kind of protocols, trying to checking out what will be the best pathway to promote the reproduction of this very, very hard species. It's not hard to. It's not easy. It's not easy. Excuse me, to promote their life again. It's not only to say is seedlings are there. I mean, even it's 5 years and never seen a flowering in the plants. Maybe a sort of lucky sometimes, but sometimes it was because we are here and checking out and always checking the plant. ¿Algo más? Some more?
No, podría el recurso, ¿no?
Okay. Aida mentioned something about the resources, but I'm gonna left that here
Okay.
in Spanish.
Sí, otra parte importante de nuestro proyecto en colaboración con la parte americana es el apoyo en cuanto a financiamiento. Nuestra institución nos aporta una cantidad en recurso financiero baja, pero el apoyo que hemos recibido por parte de Ellen y Drew dentro de sus proyectos ha sido muy importante. Nos ha permitido realizar salidas a campo, exploraciones, comprar material necesario para todos estos protocolos de germinación y mantenimiento de las plantas. Ha sido fundamental, además de otros colaboradores que no necesariamente han aportado recursos financieros, pero sí apoyo logístico como la CONAMP, CEMEX y las personas dueñas, responsables de los sitios donde se han hecho las exploraciones.
Aida's comment is very important. Actually, she's talking about the financial support, which it has been key or very, very important for the proposals of the research, that the money support that is coming from the project has strengthened a lot. Is augmentation the capacity of our normal resources. We have budget here in Lanaro, but normally it's a low budget. It allows maybe a couple of field trips and no more. And thanks for the project. Actually, the project supported by Texas Parks and Wildlife. Some of the resources are reflected, projected right here, and we have the possibility. We had the possibility to went to the places, rent a truck, have some supplies for germination and stuff like that. With make more easier, maybe not easy, but more feasible, reach our goals. Also, Aida mentioned, and it's very important. Thanks for that, Aida. Is the other supporters that maybe they are not providing money, but they are providing, logistic support, like CONAM, which is the National Commission of Protected Areas, CEMEX, which is on the other owners of the properties, because right here in Mexico, it's not easy just to even if we are in a protected area, it's not as easy as just knock the door and go and come on in. So we need to ask for permission, a lot of tramits, the normal bureaucratic things that we need always to face. So thanks for that, people, because in a very good sense, when we have that letter of support, that is a project, an international project, becomes a little bit more easy the things, and is a sort of collaboration also. What else? I mean, maybe we have too much to mention, but maybe the language is a limit. I don't know if you have a question.
La parte, ok. Una parte importante de la investigación es la experiencia que en la parte americana tienen, porque la especie sí está protegida, está reconocida como una especie crítica y tienen un reconocimiento de protección. En México no lo tenemos. Entonces queremos tomar esa experiencia para que en México podamos ingresar a esta especie dentro de una norma federal que se llama NOM 059, que es un listado donde las especies con cierta situación de riesgo, como puede ser Festuca, ligulata, estén protegidas y tengan un programa de reproducción, conservación, etcétera. Entonces, el proceso de investigación, los resultados nos permiten a nosotros crear un documento para proponer el ingreso de la especie en México como una especie protegida.
Aida mentioned that one of the more important outputs that the project is generating from Mexico is, although in Texas is Guadalupe Fescue is it's listed as a protected species. Right here in Mexico, we still have some gaps about that. The formal recognition of the species in a federal or official announcement or paper. Although the species is mentioned in the management plan of the Madras del Carmen protected area, is not the final way or the final document to really say that species is really protected and we need to make something for the species. In that particular situation, all those results that Drew kindly show us is a very good support to really promote the inclusion of this plant in our federal list, which we called Mexican official norm. It's numbered like 059, which is the list of the protected species or threatened species under a certain category. So for us, this category must to be under special protection. Because it's not an extinction, a null species like an extinctive species, but is in a high concern because the populations are, as we really know after the Drew's presentation. So this is very good point, Aida's point. So I don't know, we have still too much to do about the species. Always will be something to do with biology, with ecology. One of the most important outputs also is because if we understand even more clear the ecology, the reproduction, the physiology of the species, will be more easy. I mean, will be a good tool, maybe not easy, to use this information as a climate change indicator, maybe for a specific range. I mean, we are talking about the same Jesus Mountains, Glass Mountains, Sierra Rica in Chihuahua, and Madras del Carmen. All those set of mountains are sky islands. So because that similarity in ecological characteristics is very important to have that valuable information to strong decision makers and policy even or knowledge.
I'll just add one last little thing, and then maybe we'll get to questions. And I'm an idealist, and I feel like scientists can be some of the best ambassadors across countries and across cultures. And I feel like, that's a great role for scientists to play. Scientists are very similar everywhere. They're very similar. We have very similar sort of ways of thinking, but I think maybe because of that, we can be very good ambassadors.
Good. Actually, the more we understand the ecology of the information, the more or the easier we can take better decisions in policy or even for better decisions. Talking about science used for take decisions for decision makers. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Anna, should we go to questions?
Yes. Yeah, no, I'm absolutely thrilled that all of y'all on both sides of the border were able to attend and also be part of this project, because it means that we have a better idea for the species as a whole, not just the couple populations in Texas. But yes, so the first question is, how are the plants permanently marked?
I can say what we do in the Chisos. It's challenging, very challenging. So we use little metal stakes that go into the ground, have two parts to them, and tags. So metal tags. Now, I would say we use brass tags because we were worried if there was a fire that aluminum tags would melt. Now I wish we had used aluminum tags because they're brighter. Brass tags, over time sort of blend in, but that's how we mark them. So they have their own numbers. Yeah. Now we have a very high resolution GPS system that is incredibly helpful, that we just started using it for the first time this last fall and the year before that. So that's very helpful as well.
What?
Go ahead.
No, I mean, the name of the GPS is a total station. That was, and also we also take care of make a layout and a specific layout of it is permanently for the person who will visit in the future the particular site. In addition with Drew's comment, it's a layout with the point exactly where the plants will be. Sometimes it's together with those two metal tags together, and you have maybe 49 degrees north until then such reference, and this it makes easier, find the plants.
What is the germination rate of those seeds? I think that some of this was covered in the presentation after the question was asked, but either way.
I'll let Ida answer that.
Could you repeat the question,
Sí,
please?
entiendo que el porcentaje de germinación.
Sí.
Ajá. Tenemos valores amplios, desde un valor mínimo de alrededor 10 en nuestros experimentos hasta un 75% que hemos alcanzado de germinación. El problema no es la germinación, sino el mantenimiento de las plantas. El que las plantas puedan sobrevivir a pesar de cuando ya alcanzan una talla adecuada.
Ida mentioned that we have a wide variety of a wide range of germination coming from 10% to 75% sometimes. That's the percentage. But the problem is not the germination. I mean, if we use the right protocol, we can have some germination. The challenge instead of is survival, seedling survival. So that's the point. Is the more you watering, as Drew mentioned, or shading, or I don't know if we are. Sometimes we use even mycorrhizas to promote surviving. That's really challenge. I mean, germination is not the problem at all, about seedling surviving. Excuse me.
What animals graze on Guadalupe Fescue?
Well, I hope none, but I'm just kidding. I don't know what animals we have in the Chisos seen a little bit of evidence of something munching on Guadalupe Fescue, but not much, not very much. But I don't know. What Aida and Javier, what animals do you think might graze Guadalupe Fescue?
Do you have any answer for that? ¿Tienes una respuesta para eso?
Tuvimos una experiencia en el vivero, se lo comió, pero es en ex situ. En el hábitat natural desconozco.
Aida had an experience. I mean, we had an experience right here in the greenhouse in Anarro with some rabbits eat the plants, so they maybe think that was very good food. But in my opinion, as a range management specialist, it's not a grass with a very high forage value. It's a grass, a C3 or cool season grass, which is limited protein, or I mean, it's other thing that we also can measure, but it's not as a priority. But because it's not a very palatable or very desirable species for grazers, at least my observations in the field is like maybe squirrel, maybe some rodents, little rodents. They can forage sometimes seedlings in places where they don't have another option to graze or browse. Another thing, at least in Cañón del Caballo population, it's not grazing, but it's trampling. It's just in front of the bear cave, un oso. So sometimes, but it's normal. It's not under our control. So tracking in the places, and also because many of the populations are in places really steep. So if any animal just walk through the line, sometimes it's not foraging, it's not tramping, but it's like destroying the structure of the site. Is also affecting the plants.
What soil recipe was used for growing the seedlings for successful transition from the nursery to the site?
It's Aida's turn.
Sí. Ok. Primero germinamos en charolas.
Adelante.
Primero germinamos en charolas. Utilizamos una mezcla de peat moss, agrolita y rocas. En otra experiencia, Javier nos trajo suelo del lugar y hicimos una mezcla. Utilizamos charolas germinadoras. Una vez que las plantas alcanzaron 15 centímetros aproximadamente de longitud, las trasplantamos en espacios más grandes, en contenedores más grandes, y para transportarlas a su área o a su hábitat natural, perdón, utilizamos bolsas de plástico que fueran fáciles de llevar a la localidad, pero las plantas más antiguas que tenemos, que son las que nos proporcionaron Drew y Ellen, ya están en el suelo, ya están en un sitio directamente en el suelo, y es ahí donde obtuvimos la respuesta de floración este año pasado.
It's too much español. But, okay. Do you have any percentage? ¿Tienes un porcentaje para esto?
Sí, bueno, proporción 80-10.
Okay. Aida mentioned about the mix of soil and also not only the soil recipe, but also the mixture of the soil and substrates that she is using. Normally she uses first for germination purposes, peat moss at 80%, agrolite in 10%, and any rock of medium size, like a cobbles maybe, 10%. In one occasion, I bring to her some soil from the site, specific from the site, and so we took care of use this soil only for the plant. And when the plants are big enough, seedling, not a seedling, it's like a medium or mature plant, as about 15 centimeters of height. The transplant to another container, normally plastic, the normal black plastic containers, and that's the way that's how we did it.
We're at 1:02, but assuming that y'all are available, I'll go for a couple more minutes for a couple more questions.
I am okay.
Okay. In the greenhouse, are you transplanting seedlings from small containers to larger containers to avoid root binding and improve the growth?
Sí, como ya lo mencioné, cuando alcanzan una talla adecuada, trasplantamos a un contenedor o a una maceta que permita formar la raíz para que desarrolle también la parte vegetativa.
Yes, always. The answer is yes. It's always trying to provide more space for root growing, which is normal, all the protocols.
Can you expand on the reproductive biology of the species? That's a big question. I guess choose your favorite part.
Yeah, this is going to maybe sound astounding. We don't really even know whether it's self-compatible or not, whether it can self-fertilize. That seems essential, but it's hard work to do that. It's not like part of the project, but we would like to establish sort of nurseries in the field and sort of raise plants and more seeds and actually do bagging experiments, et cetera, to actually figure out some of the fundamentals. But other than that, we do know that there's tremendous variation year to year in terms of production of flowers. We know there's tremendous variation year to year. Even when they produce flowers, often they're not filling the seeds. So we know there's a lot of variation, but there are a lot of fundamentals that we still do not understand. And that would be important to understand for sure. I don't know if you all, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, there's always more to know.
Yes. We're waiting for the next grant from Texas Parks and Wildlife.
Okay. How many days did the seeds germinate? Within how many days did the seeds germinate in the lab? And when did seedlings appear in the field?
Sí, la germinación ex situ hemos registrado que es alrededor del día 7 después de la siembra. Entre el día 7 y el día 15 es cuando cuando se empieza a formar la radícula y la parte vegetativa. Y las semillas aparecen.
First part of the question I mentioned is 7 days, around 7 days from the day you are seeding the seed, and in 7 days it start to form radicula and new leaves. And the second part of it is for the ex situ populations, obviously. And for the second part of the question, ¿cuándo aparecen en el campo?
En junio, pero regularmente es de septiembre a octubre cuando está
cuando las plántulas aparecen.
No.
It is very hard to say because it depends. If you are just promoting, artificially the plant. If you are putting in June, maybe it depends the water, and to say it's very variable. It's hard.
I could say two things about that. One, just to make sure everyone understands. We're planting in the field, the transplants, we're planting seedlings. We're not planting seeds, just to make sure everyone understands that. But the other is that, at least in Boot Canyon, we have seen over the entire study, hardly any seedlings at all. And maybe it's been, as you know, I hardly need to tell you, in Texas, it's been really hot and dry, and there was a fire as well. But we are seeing almost no seedlings. And perhaps this is a species that, is can go many years without producing a recruitment pulse. And then suddenly there are a lot of them. We don't know. That's a really important question, though, in the long run, is this recruitment question.
So I'm going to cut it off there.